Welcome, everybody. I'm David Bloom with Next TMT, and the newsletter, and a writer for various outlets. And this is Next TMT Talks. We have with us the distinguished Tony Huidor, who is the COO and CTO, Chief Technology Officer for Cineverse, one of the more interesting streaming providers in the world, I think, because they have their hands in a lot of really highly targeted niche services. We are here. This will run, I believe, on the opening day of NAB, the National Association of Broadcasting, which has become also the National Association of Streamers. It says suddenly. And I want to start, I guess, Tony, with welcome, and tell us a little bit about what you guys have planned. I think NAB is a little lower key for you guys this year, but what you guys have planned at NAB and what you expect to see at the show.
First of all, thank you for having me, David. Good to see you. Always appreciate these opportunities to chat. Yes, NAB is 2 weeks away or so for us. It's not generally one of our bigger shows, but the show has really morphed to really focus on streaming quite a bit. It's really pivoted from a lot of the television broadcast. And I think last year I was really surprised at how strong a presence streaming was there at the show. For us, my focus this year is Matchpoint, licensing Matchpoint, getting it out, and making it available to big media companies who are struggling with scaling their OTT services. You see in the news a lot, all the big media companies are under pressure from Wall Street to cut costs, and we think Matchpoint's a very good way of doing that. It's been custom built specifically for streaming, and so we think this year is a year that Matchpoint really breaks out as a product for these big media companies.
So Matchpoint's a really cool name, but let's just for those who aren't quite up to date on everything that you've got your hands in, because you're a busy guy. Matchpoint is the internal platform, I guess is the best way to put it, right? That you guys use. So talk a little bit about what Matchpoint is. This is certainly a happy hunting ground, I would think, for that panoply, particularly of niche streamers. But it sounds like you're hunting bigger game as well. Companies that are trying, do we buy it or build it? Kind of conversation. You guys can walk in, white label it, and make their lives all better.
Yeah, absolutely. At very high level, Matchpoint is our own proprietary, we say generically, our streaming platform, but it's primarily three products: Matchpoint Dispatch, which is content ingestion, content prep, content mastering, content delivery. So Dispatch was really designed to take video and distribute it widely. That's what has allowed us to distribute our channels and our content to every platform out there in North America. There's tremendous value there for media companies who are struggling. It's all automated, machine-based, so very high scalability. It operates at significant scale. The second product is Matchpoint Blueprint, which is as media companies start to focus on a direct-to-consumer strategy, Blueprint is really designed for that. It allows a company to easily develop and distribute streaming apps across every streaming platform. This is across desktop, mobile, and connected TV. So as the big media companies look to cut costs and reduce costs, custom app development just isn't scalable. And so really what Matchpoint was designed to do was to eliminate a lot of that custom dev and really streamline the process of updating and releasing streaming apps. And lastly, the product that, incidentally or ironically, the last thing that anyone ever looks at when they enter a new business, especially related to emerging technologies, reporting. It's the least sexy, and that's the area that most companies don't look at. But that's one area that ultimately has the most impact on your relationships with your partners. We've been in streaming very early, and we were very early in defining the need for streaming. So we're a little unique in that Matchpoint Insights, which is our reporting platform, is a consolidated or unified reporting, content reporting, and analytics platform. Anywhere that we deliver to, Insights automates ability to ingest revenue and performance reports and essentially bring it in, clean it up, match it, scrub it, visualize it, and report on it. So that is another product where we think, because of our head start against everyone else in the industry, we think we have a strength on the reporting side. And that will this year and next, I think you're going to start seeing a lot more traction for companies who are looking for unified reporting, and we feel we have a very good, strong product for that.
Real quickly, you talked about scale. We've seen, I would say, I want to say there's been some consolidation, but it doesn't really feel like there has in terms of distribution outlets. I mean, people like the Trade Desk now are coming up with their own TVOS operate platforms, et cetera, et cetera. Roughly how many platforms are you guys distributing to? Because that's the real complication, is all the different platforms have all their own stuff that they need. And so you guys are doing that instead of every client having to come through and do that, right? Isn't that the difference in the value add that you help bring to the table?
Correct. We're a relatively small company. I think if you were to count the number of people who have hands-on operational duties for distributing content, it's probably a dozen, and which is pretty amazing. But we deliver to every major streaming platform across every business model in North America. So for fast channels, we delivered to over 28. But when you consider the AVOD or SVOD, it's over 130. So with one platform, we can place an order that takes a few minutes and deliver thousands of files without a single person touching a single file. So that level of automation has significant value. And for us, the differentiator, the competitive advantage has been it allows us to release our content and launch channels on every platform, regardless of size. And what we've learned over the years is sometimes a platform may do really well on AVOD, but not on FAST, or vice versa. And so we have a really good lay of the land. We know which channels make money on which platforms, either as an SVOD or AVOD or SVOD product. And once again, we deliver to all those business models. And so that has allowed us to diversify our revenue stream. We're not dependent on any one business model or any one single platform.
Which is great. You guys just did a deal with Symphony AI, which is helping beef up some of what you guys are offering, right? Can you talk briefly about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Symphony AI has been a great partner for us. Taking a step back, once again, Matchpoint as a product and a platform, there's certain areas where I feel we want to focus and we want to own, and we feel we have value to add. And there's other areas where it's not core to our product. It's not something we have expertise. It's not something I feel we could do well. And so AI chatbots is an example of visualizing data, specifically humongous volumes of data, is not our expertise. And so we've partnered with Symphony AI to come in, and essentially we leverage their technology. Matchpoint from day one was designed, and really the idea behind Matchpoint was, if we don't do something, find a partner that we can integrate tightly through an API, and once again automate that. And so Symphony AI is a good example. We have a lot of data that we've been collecting going back 10 years that there's so much data we don't know what to do with it, or we can't work in volumes that large. So with AI, they're going to be able to allow us to bring in a substantial amount of business insight and nuance that we can't see because the volumes of data is just too big. So that's an area that they specialize in, and so we're thrilled to be partnering with them.
Your Matchpoint initiative in general feels in some ways like a throwback to the earliest days of Cineverse, which used to have a different name, when it was kind of the technology provider for theater conversions to digital projection, like 15 years ago, right? I mean, here you are helping this next generation of distribution, of digital distribution, with a set of tools and capabilities that companies might not have or can't afford to maintain at a high level. So it feels like you guys are recapitulating in some ways the history of Cineverse in some ways. Is that?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. For those who don't know, Cineverse as a company was formerly Cinedigm, and Cinedigm made its mark on converting exhibition from film to digital.
Hundreds and hundreds.
So they literally installed the projectors, and not just the digital projector, but all the back office software for theaters to move away from film to digital exhibition. And the company was quite successful. At one point, they managed and controlled over 30% of the market of theaters. Every movie that was streamed, 30% of them were coming through Cineverse technology. As a company, as that business started to sunset and digital became very commonplace, the company had to pivot, and so we pivoted to become a distribution company. And ultimately, that legacy or that heritage that we had with theatrical became part of our mission statement. We felt that as a home entertainment company, that was part of our business, but our heritage really allowed for us to focus on technology and be a provider. And what we've done with Matchpoint is, as we like to say, we eat our own dog food. And so we're in the business of distributing content. We're not a third-party vendor that's making money on SaaS fees. We're a distribution company. And our goal with Matchpoint is to give our partners the ability to scale their business. And if they succeed, we succeed. And for us, any issues that they're encountering with scale, we've already encountered it because we're in the same business. And because we operate at such scale and across every business model, it's very rare to get a client or a partner who's looking for a need that we haven't already addressed. And that's really our advantage. As a distribution company, we've leaned very heavily on technology to be a white label technology provider.
Yeah. You mentioned something in passing about how you have learned with the wading through all the data that gets generated across all these platforms about stuff that works well here or in this sort of distribution structure, fast versus AVOD versus SVOD. And I'm curious if there's anything you can be more granular about, or, you know, like this kind of channel does well on this kind of platform, or this actual platform does really well with these kinds of things. Is there anything you can say to kind of give people an idea, like this really works well on this, for instance?
Yeah, it's highly nuanced, to be honest, but just at a high level for us, Tubi does exceedingly well with AVOD content. We've launched streaming channels, fast channels. They didn't do so well. But yet, if you go to Samsung, Samsung is the 800-pound gorilla in the space. Fast channels do very, very well on Samsung, but VOD doesn't. And same thing with apps. You know, Samsung, even though they have their own ecosystem for apps, don't necessarily perform as well for us as they do on Roku. Roku apps do really well. So part of what we have learned over the years is by having wide distribution, it gives us very important and valuable insight in terms of, from a strategy, if you're looking to release somewhere, who do you want to partner with, where are you going to make the money, where you're not going to make the money. And so from being able to prioritize where you want to spend your resources or your marketing dollars, we have a lot of very good insight from historical experience. But where it starts getting more interesting is when you have that data, which we do, how do you go deeper, you know, down on the seasonality or even the day parting basis? There's a lot of interest within the industry to get reporting for fast channel on a day parting basis that you do with traditional television. Those capabilities don't exist. So that's an area that we're working on implementing and solving that problem. Anyone can solve that problem, is really allows the industry to move forward as a whole, because that's something that was core to broadcasting and reporting on television, and that just doesn't exist in fast.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing. So you guys, it's important to note, you are the king of the technology and emerging technology, and that's sort of what you've built a good chunk of your career on personally. But you all also distribute a bunch of channels. So talk a little bit about that side of the business as you eat your own dog food. I mean, how many channels do you have, and a couple of the examples of the ones that are particularly prominent? And
yeah, absolutely. You know, interestingly, when I first joined, we bet on SVOD, and we were way too early. Netflix obviously is the king in SVOD, and it's very difficult to compete with Netflix and other streamers who operate at that scale. So years later, we pivoted to support AVOD, and that was fortuitous because it happened right before COVID. And then when the pandemic hit, everyone was home watching video, and we saw overnight just reversal of our revenue from transactional being primary driver to suddenly AVOD and fast being the primary drivers of our revenue. So for us, the technology has always been part of what has allowed us to compete, and it has allowed us to expand. We manage over 30 fast channels to date. Some of the better known ones is Bob Ross. We were there very early with Bob Ross. That has been a huge hit for us. We recently, in this past year, launched Barney. The viewership that we see on Barney is just through the charts. It's just the engagement we see there with children's content is unbelievable. Dog Whisper is another one we recently launched that's done well for us, not only in the US, but it has allowed us to open doors internationally. So each of these channels brings more opportunity to us, and we're able to leverage those opportunities because Matchpoint allows us to expand our distribution without having to run any type of revenue forecast or ROI analysis. We're able to take risks that most other companies can't, because for us to deliver a catalog of 10,000 movies is automated and costs us very little, whereas most other big media companies use vendors, and having to deliver 10,000 movies in 6 weeks just isn't viable, not only from a time perspective, but from a cost perspective. It would cost millions to deliver a catalog that large.
Well, what's your take at this point as a longtime niche streaming service or series of streaming services about the state of these things? We see Netflix making money, a lot of money. We see Disney making a little bit of money. We see Warner Brothers trying to make a little bit of money, and other folks still struggling. But then you guys are a smaller scale, but highly targeted and well distributed across everything. What does the future of streaming look like as you look out over the entire horizon here?
We've always looked at OTT, or the video streaming market, holistically, and as we've discussed, we see it as a four-legged stool. You can't come to market and only run fast channels, and you run everything through a Magi or whatever. One, the cost structure is too high, and two, you're really at risk of market downturns with macroeconomic events. So the ad market is down, and if all you do is fast channels, guess what? You're probably in pretty bad shape right now because the ad market is in shambles. And so for us, what we've done is we've learned to place bets across the entire relate table. And so we have AVOD services across every streaming platform. We have SVOD, we have apps, we have FAST, we have TVOD, we have theatrical. So really the mission for us, or the goal that really over the last few years really started to come into picture, was we have to be a next generation studio, fully vertically integrated, where we control the entire process and don't rely on vendors, but we have the ability to distribute across every different platform affordably, quickly, and at a lower cost than anyone else. That's given us a huge competitive advantage. And it's interesting that a lot of the pain the big media companies are feeling right now is like, oh, we're making money, but we're hemorrhaging cash. And operating services, whether big or small, is a very cash intensive industry to enter. And we feel we've solved that, because in order for us to survive, we had to cut our costs. The only difference is we've done it 6 years ago. So we operate very efficiently because we've already cut all those expensive costs and vendors out of our supply chain. So we're not dependent on running a streaming service and we have a vendor that's using up 30% of our revenue. And so ultimately for us, we had to become very agnostic and support a variety of different technology partners, from CDN to ad platform to linear playout to SSAI. We've had to become modular in order to keep our costs down. Most companies in this space don't. They put all their eggs in one basket with one vendor, and they're at risk from macroeconomic events, or they're entirely at the whim of the vendor.
You mentioned in passing theatrical. I had occasion to talk to your boss, my old boss, Chris McGurk, the CEO and chairman of the company, last fall about Terrifier 3, which I thought was a really fascinating case study in marrying a very niche, hardcore horror film with your own in-house social media components, as well as your streaming service and the website that you guys own focused on horror. Talk a little bit about the Terrifier 3. It did so well in its opening weekend. It won the opening weekend, which is unheard of for a film that cost what, $1 million to make, and you spent a $500,000 on marketing, if I recall the numbers. Maybe it was a little bit higher than that, but it was ridiculous because it was beating like the second week of the Joker um, sequel, which deserved to be beaten like a drum. But that being said, it was shocking that a film that probably cost less than the mobile phone budget for the other film ended up winning the weekend with, I think, $19 million in domestic gross, which was amazing. So talk a little bit about the playbook for Terrifier 3 and how you built up a series of kind of integrated tools to be able to take a very small film and make it really work with a loyal niche audience.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. I would say there, the success of that, there's many different factors that ultimately led for that movie becoming such a breakout hit for us. But we feel one of the areas that we've done well, and we believe that filmmakers really, understand this and believe in us, was a few years ago when we we released Terrifier 2. We didn't know what we had and we weren't prepared, and we found ourselves scrambling as the movie took off to really be able to service it properly. So this time around, when we got the rights to it, we were already planning, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And once again, it goes back to the idea of us being a fully integrated studio, next generation movie studio, where we have not only a presence, but expertise and proprietary technology across from distribution to exhibition. And so that was a good opportunity for us to really test this use case that we were developing and continue to develop. But ultimately, with Matchpoint, there's a couple of things that have worked really well. One, we did a very highly targeted social media campaign and limited budget. We spent a little over $2 million on producing the film, and we were limited in what we could spend marketing for various reasons, so we could only spend $500,000. So the advantage of owning 30 fast channels is you get free advertising inventory. So for us, we were able to start promoting the movie months in advance using traditional quote unquote television advertising at the cost much less than what you would pay for television advertising. And then
So
through
it's
the
basically house ads is what you're talking about,
house
right?
ads, which are, it's unused inventory. It's either use it or lose it.
Right.
And so,
Right. That
so
empty seat on the airplane, basically.
and most other companies are spending money just for that awareness campaign. And so for us, it didn't cost us anything. And then along the way, we were making use of social in ways that, as a small company, we were pretty nimble. And that helped sort of create groundswell amongst the horror fans. But ultimately, for it to be successful, we had to move away from horror into mainstream. And so quite a few things went well. The social led to news coverage. The news coverage led to more people watching it. More people watching it meant people were vomiting or fainting, and then that became an ongoing news story. And so suddenly we were no longer just on social and small, online publications. We went mainstream. We were television. All the big media companies, all the big national newspapers suddenly were covering this little horror movie that's breaking records. And more importantly, the fact that we beat Joker 2 on opening weekend, and Joker 2 was a $300 million movie, ours was 2.5, and we beat them soundly on opening weekend, that became part of the narrative for the movie. But ultimately, none of that would have mattered if we didn't have the ability to amplify it. So we then knew at that point from box office data who our audience was. And through our ad network, we were able to target specific demographics. Oh, it's indexing heavily Hispanic or African American or women of this age. So we now have an ad platform with free advertising that we can target. And through our audience extension program, Cineverse 360, we're able to advertise and target audiences who are not even on our own channels. They might be on BET or ESPN, and we still have the ability to reach those consumers because we have a fully integrated platform that once again, we control the full stack. And so it's very unique for a media company to be able to do this. Back in the day, the Paramount decree essentially declared that movie studios couldn't own theaters. Well, for us, we have the equivalent of that before the Paramount decree. We have the ability to ingest, distribute, but also service on our own channels, but also distribute B2B to other partners. So ultimately, it was this big giant flywheel, both from the social campaign leading to larger press coverage to television, but then also the internal technology we built allowed us to build on the data and use that data to target users more effectively, and essentially with ad inventory that was very affordable for us because of the position we play within the business.
I think that it's interesting. A couple of things you said in there in particular. One is I don't think we should overlook. You guys had acquired control of Bloody Disgusting, a horror-focused website, and they became kind of talent scouts for you guys. They knew what worked for that specific, very demanding but very loyal audience, right? So that was a really good footprint or foundation from which to begin with. And I think they found the original Terrifier, and it did well on leading into Terrifier 2. And so you knew you had something and you could invest, right, with some confidence. But then you had this much more complicated thing. And then I think the thing that's interesting is you couldn't just stay in the horror universe, the hardcore or core horror audience. You wanted to expand and pull folks in. And there's nothing like a little vomiting and fainting to help sell, to market a horror film, I guess. I mean, they've been doing that for decades now, but helpful to have the sensitive watch and then appropriately collapse. So
Yeah, and just to add to that, so yes, obviously owning Bloody Disgusting, who is the #1 premier online destination for horror fans, helped. It gave us a very effective megaphone or soapbox to say, hey, this movie's out. Bloody Disgusting has really become the Roger Ebert of horror. Like they could say this movie's good, this movie's not, and the fans will follow because they trust their taste in film. And so having Bloody Disgusting be uh, part of the story on bringing Terrifier to the screens and really being an early supporter of Damien Leone and his vision for horror, that made a huge impact on the success of the movie. I should also say that when we acquired Bloody Disgusting, we acquired a handful of podcasts that we were distributing as part of that. They were distributing prior to us acquiring them. Early on, we saw good success and we amplified it. We now manage over close to 60 podcasts through that relationship with Bloody Disgusting, and we've become a major podcasting publisher. We are now top 10. We have more downloads for podcasts than the New York Times or CNN or Disney. Big media companies, huge media companies. We have a higher presence in the podcast charts than they do, and we've done that in 2 years. And so the audio podcasting was a huge driver as well for advertising Terrifier 3. It allowed us to essentially advertise on quote unquote radio. So we were able to do radio spots through our podcast network, once again, at very low cost because we own these podcasts and we own the network. So we were very unique in that we're, once again, going back to the next generation entertainment studio metaphor, we were omni-channel. We were able to do email blast, social, television, radio. The only thing we didn't do was print, but no one advertised movies.
Who's left in print? That is like, what's left? I say this to somebody who made a living in print for decades, so it's a little heartbreaking, but that's reality. You guys didn't do a lot of billboards and bus sides though, or bus benches, right?
No, we didn't, but we did do, once again, we were able to spend the money wisely. So we did do a big ad in Times Square in New York. We also did an animated ad in Union Square in New York.
And let's be clear, Times Square, a horror show most days itself. So anybody that's there is totally into it, right? So
I would do a shout out to the marketing team. There was, because we had that big billboard in Times Square, we had a live activation where Art the Clown, we took him around the city and in costume, and we were taking photos that would go viral on social. And there was one photo where him standing in Times Square and looking sad, and behind him there's a big banner for Joker. And it was really just a kind of a stab at Joker for just ruining everyone's expectations. that post went viral. And once again, that created such an awareness for the movie. And it really became a David and Goliath story. The narrative became the little engine that could is up against this $300 million movie and it's winning. And that once again fed into the narrative for the movie, which led not only to success theatrically, but also when we released it on TVOD and PVOD, and then we're also licensing it, and it's finally making its way into Screenbox. So one of the things that we were better prepared for this time was having a very well-defined release strategy with the traditional windowing strategy that we hadn't done the last time around. So we were able to really extract more revenue and performance from the movie this time because we knew what we had. We just needed to amplify it, and we did a really good job of that.
And you guys, I think it was you, it might have been Chris. This really helps with all the subsequent releases of Terrifier 3 on your streaming services, right? This is a case where the theatrical really feeds into VOD sales and things like that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. What we saw last time with Terrifier 2 was there was a tremendous rush for people to see it once it went to streaming services. And we saw it as well as this time. The advantage is when the movie is available on our streaming services, we keep a higher percentage of the revenue. So ultimately for us, we want to drive users to our streaming services because we own the customer, we have the data, and we keep a higher percentage of the revenue for people to watch it on our streaming services. So there's a big advantage for that.
You're talking compared to
say
right.
say licensing it to Amazon or somewhere where you're going to have to give up a revenue share. When
Sure.
we host it and make it available on our own proprietary streaming services, you don't have to have that share with the partner.
I'm interested. I want to talk to you a little bit about. So we've got NAB coming up. You guys are going to be at the Cosmopolitan. And
Yes.
what are you guys doing at NAB besides, I don't know, drinking Cosmopolitans perhaps, but that doesn't really seem like your kind of drink. But maybe I'm wrong.
I drank it back in my college days, not so much anymore.
Right, right. It does. As a man grows up, he puts away childish things.
Yeah, our focus for NAB is really one of the things I've been working on is really assembling a sales team. As I said before, we are a home entertainment company that pivoted to a technology company, and part of that pivot requires building a sales culture and a sales team, and that's what we've been focusing on for the last 2 years. As I said before, we're starting to see traction now that the market just wasn't ready for a product like this before, or there was established vendors that kind of controlled that business. Brightcove, for example, a lot of the big media companies have relationships with Brightcove, and we're using Brightcove. But Brightcove made the mistake that they didn't pivot to streaming early enough or fast enough, so they really fell behind the curve, and so they found themselves with a product that wasn't a good market fit. All their partners were looking for VOD and apps and other streaming capabilities, and Brightcove was really designed for web. And so Brightcove has been acquired by Bending Spoons out of Europe, and Bending Spoon is doing what they've done with other acquisitions. They're cutting staff, refocusing them on just the core part of what they think there's value. And so it creates an opportunity for us, for those customers who were previously on Brightcove, who are looking for next generation solution, we have the right product. And so building a sales team focused on match point sales is really going to allow us to get in front of that audience.
Okay, so tell me a little bit. Symphony AI, obviously, you guys are playing in the AI space to some extent, but I suspect you probably have your hands, given your interest in using the tools that are out there as a force multiplier. I'm guessing you've got AI in a lot of places within what Cineverse is doing. So talk a little bit about how you're using AI in various ways.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would say, I think part of what we're known for is being early, innovating, and so embracing technology. Having Matchpoint as a foundation really allows us to focus on, we've already solved the problem of delivering video from point A to point B at scale. So we're able to focus on, well, what do we do next? And so AI has been an area that we've really leaned in very heavily for a number of years. We developed our recommendation engine years ago, and we've developed a lot of tools for content ingestion and content delivery that's driven by AI. A big focus of ours right now is a product called Cinesearch. We've announced it a year ago, and each quarter we've sort of made subsequent progress. The idea of Cinesearch is to solve the problem that's endemic with streaming, which is you sit down in front of the TV, you don't know what to watch. Discovery is a problem. You don't know what to look for. If you use the search engines with your TV or with your streaming platform, all of their search is substandard. They all rely on metadata that was developed 50 years ago for television listings. You can't get good search results when you have old metadata. So Cinesearch is an AI-based chatbot that you have a conversation with and ask about movies. And the chatbot, by linking your accounts, knows everything you've ever watched from every platform that you subscribe to. So it knows your taste, it knows what movies you like, what movies you don't like. But more importantly, we've had to create new types of metadata in order to enable advanced AI search. So Cinesearch is a combination of all these things, and we feel that we have solved the problem or the dilemma of good search and discovery. One example I give is go to any streaming service you use and type in best holiday movies or top kids movies. You're going to find terrible results, or if you get results at all. Whereas with Cinesearch, if you type in best holiday movies, you get Miracle on 34th Street, Home Alone, Die Hard, Love Actually, and some other well-known holiday movies, because AI doesn't, most traditional search doesn't know what holiday means. So you need AI to kind of understand, well, what does best mean and what does holiday mean? So you need AI to understand the intent of the user's request. And then once it understands the intent, then it needs to search the films at a deeper level than just synopsis, talent, director, year. Right. So you need to create all this metadata for the AI to say, well, this person is looking for a well-reviewed movie focused on the holiday season, Christmas, and then it conducts a search on that basis. So in order to allow that to work, you have to build that metadata. And that's what we've done. And so we feel very confident that when we bring this product to market, we'll be making some announcements shortly that we want to make this available for licensing. We think that through this technology, we can really make streaming, watching video on streaming services much more enjoyable.
It seems really crucial, but I guess you could say there's no holiday for AI. They're working all the time.
They're working
so that's why they're going, what is this holiday thing you are talking about? We do not know this. Or whatever the appropriate word is, or the appropriate accent is for an AI that I guess you could choose your own. But thanks, that's interesting stuff. Is it also limited by the fact that the search engines don't typically cross the walled gardens, for instance, of the SVOD services? And sometimes it's just difficult to find things that are everything as opposed to just this garden versus this garden.
Yeah, absolutely. The example I give is if you go to Netflix and you're looking for, a funny adventure pirate movie, the thing that would come to mind is Pirates of the Caribbean, but Netflix doesn't have that. So it just ignores your question and it gives you other movies that have nothing to do with pirates. And that's one of the challenges when you're building a streaming service where you only control a portion of the catalog. How do you respond to someone who's looking for a movie that you don't carry? And so early on, one of the product decisions I had to make was we were developing this for Cinesearch, for Cineverse, and I had to step back and say, well, the real value is giving them a recommendation regardless of where it is. And ultimately, my goal is just to make them happy, regardless if they go to Disney or somewhere else, because I know I will never have Pirates of the Caribbean. So I might as well just tell them, go to Disney. Disney controls Pirates of the Caribbean. What everyone else does is they just ignore your question, which is a terrible user experience.
Yeah, that's a terrible user experience, particularly when actually what Netflix will do is the knockoff version of Pirates of the Caribbean known as Buccaneers of the Sargasso Sea. And they'll send you there, and it will not include Johnny Depp, but it will. Bob Tepp is the pirate. But you get what you pay for. But they've actually spent a lot of time trying to solve some of this. But again, theirs is Netflix only. So as big as that content sea, Sargasso Sea is, it's not everything by a long way. So that's really interesting stuff. Great. You guys, I think, are also going to have a big presence at streaming TV in June, and some of the other stuff. But one last sort of big picture question I'd love to get your feedback on, which is you deal with all of the platforms, all the OEM owners. You have some visibility into what's good on what. So that, I would think that gives you a kind of a special relationship with them in some ways, and the people that would put their own channels on these services. What learnings have you guys had, and what trends or shifts are you seeing in the market?
Definitely the probably the part of the business that's most sensitive to macroeconomic events is the advertising. And for us, I would say we've developed and announced Cineverse 360. This past year, our focus now is to continue to invest heavily on the ad tech side of the business. We think there's tremendous opportunity there. We'll be making an announcement in that area shortly as well. But having access to the advertising data is immensely valuable when you're trying to understand why the market is down. And so it allows us to be more competitive on pricing. And also, as we're running campaigns, we can see where the viewership is. So all this ultimately, once again, the advantage of what we're doing is, and I think oftentimes it's missed by analysts, that the fact that we own this technology ultimately feeds the streaming business, and the streaming business feeds the technology. So it's a flywheel that as they succeed, they will both continue to feed in each other and create more opportunity. So for us, we do have access to the ad data. We have access to the subscription data across every platform. So that's really valuable. I think the challenge has been when you have that much data, the visualization, and that's where the AI comes in. And once again, our partnership with Symphony AI will essentially, it's like adding nitro to a race car. It's really going to allow us to do a lot more, just more effectively at a higher velocity than we've been able to do with before.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is David Bloom with Next TMT Talks, talking with Tony Huidor, who is the COO and CTO for Cineverse, one of the more interesting streaming home entertainment companies out there. It contains multitudes despite its small employee footprint. You're getting a lot out of each person, it's clear. But thank you, Tony, for your time. This is good stuff.
Thank you, David. As always, appreciate talking to you.
Pleasure. See you in Vegas.
Thank you. See you.